Hi everyone, we're back for chapter 6 of Beau at Ballard Creek, and this chapter is called At the Roadhouse. When Oscar and Beau went into the roadhouse with Clara's magazines, Milo was making a new pot of coffee in the big percolator. Milo was a short, square man from Yugoslavia. He had a huge head of gray hair, and he always wore a dirty dish towel wrapped around his middle. His coffee pot was dirty too, black and greasy, not shiny like Jack's. Some of the old-timers, Jimmy the Pirate, Thomas, and Ollie Deglar, were there as usual drinking coffee. They were retired and had time to drink coffee all day if they wanted. They bragged that Milo made the worst coffee on the Koyukuk, and only strong men like them could drink it and live. Beau and Oscar had tried some once, and it certainly was terrible. Dinuk, who was Jonas's papa, and Unskirt, who was Nakaluk's old husband, were there too, playing cribbage. They didn't like coffee. "Here's bad Oscar and his sidekick Beau," Milo said when they came together. That was what he always said. "What are you two outlaws up today?" "Up to no good," said Jimmy the Pirate. They called him that because he only had one eye. Sometimes he wore a black patch over his bad eye, but sometimes he didn't. His bad eye was very interesting. It was milky and twisted, and the lid red and angry-looking. "Aquata today," said Beau. Nakaluk is making it." Ollie made a gagging face to show what he thought of Aquata, and Beau laughed. "You kids don't go around the river today," said Jimmy. "Ice is breaking up and water might come fast." "We know," said Beau. Oscar held out the magazines his mother had given him. "Ma says thank you," he said to Milo. Cannibal Ivan came to the roadhouse looking grumpy. He was called Cannibal because he liked his meat just barely cooked, pink all the way through. He never got it that way at Milo's, though he complained about it. "Rheumatism keeps me up all night," he said, pulling up a chair. "Getting old." Beau looked at Cannibal carefully. "I thought you already were old," she said. Cannibal ignored that. "Well, don't just stand there," he said to Beau and Oscar. "Sit down and have a cup of coffee with us." Beau and Oscar smiled at him. "I hate coffee," Oscar said. Jimmy leaned forward and looked at Oscar seriously. "That's why you don't have no whiskers yet." There were a lot of good things to do at the roadhouse, besides reading magazines. Milo had a big, fancy iron coffee mill that stood on the floor next to the big wood stove. Milo let any of the children who were handy turn the crank to grind the coffee beans into powder. It wasn't hard, and the coffee smelled good. Beau wished the coffee tasted like it smelled. The bar stools were another good thing. They were left over from the old days when people sat at the bar to drink whiskey. Before there was a law about whiskey, those stools would spin around in the circle. The children took turns spinning each other until they were dizzy. And then there were two big brass spittoons at either end of the bar. The spittoons were for people who didn't set their tobacco on fire. They chewed their tobacco, and when they were finished with it, they needed a place to spit it out, and that was what a spittoon was for. No one in Ballard Creek chewed their tobacco anymore, but Milo kept the spittoons. He said you could never tell when someone would come in who needed one, and you certainly didn't want to have people who chewed left on their own without a spittoon. You couldn't tell where they'd let it fly. What Ballard Creek kids liked about the spittoons was that you could see yourself in them. Not your real self, but a shiny gold-leaf self with a big fat nose and weird eyes and all sorts of funny mouths depending on how far you stood away and how you made faces. Making faces in the spittoons was one of their favorite things. Can you see the little picture of them? The roadhouse was a long building, and it had to be because it was used for so many things. In one corner was Milo's little store, where he sold everything: canned food, dried beans, sugar and salt, 30-30 shells, tobacco, pilot bread crackers, tea. Sometimes Beau would dust the top of all the cans and set them up in neat rows after everyone had messed things up. When the scow came in, There were American cheese, eggs, onions, and sometimes oranges. But they didn't last long, because when the sow came in with fresh food, people would pile up at the store counter in the roadhouse, pushing each other a little, and before long it was all sold. But Milo always saved exactly 15 oranges, enough for every child in town. He'd write their names on the bumpy skin with a grease pencil so he wouldn't leave anyone out or give two to the same person. Ekuk, Sammy, Maniluk, Jonas, Johnny, Della, Atok, Pelek, Kaput, Evelina, Oscar, Lena, Annie, Betty, Bo. Lots of times people couldn't pay for their groceries, but Milo would just write their names in the book on the counter, and they'd pay when they had some money, or when they brought in something to sell, like furs in the winter, or dried fish in the fall, or maybe fresh caribou, or sheep meat after they'd been hunting. When Jack sent Bo to the store for something, Milo always opened a green book with the red leather corners and found the page that said Ballard Mining Company. Then he'd let Bo sign her name next to the list of things she bought. She could write a really lumpy O, but her B always went wrong. "Is that right?" she'd ask Milo. "Backwards again," he'd say. "Better luck next time." Upstairs there were 6 rooms for overnight visitors. That's where the game warden, Sam White, stayed when he came into town, the mail carriers, and the marshal, Hank. In the winter it was very cold upstairs. Everyone who stayed there said they could see their breath. But in the summer it was incredibly hot. So Milo said it evened out. Those 6 rooms were pretty dusty and not noticeably clean, but nobody who came to the roadhouse was fussy. Bo and Oscar and Jimmy the pirate watched Yerskik and Dinnick play cribbage for a while. Bo thought it looked like fun, but there were too much counting. Counting was not one of her best things. "My wife liked to play cribbage," said Jimmy, "but she always cheated." Bo looked at Jimmy with surprise. None of the old-timers had wives. "Where is your wife, Jimmy?" she said. "Oh, I kind of lost track of her," said Jimmy, and he winked at Milo. Bo hadn't known you could lose track of wives. Jack was shaving and Arvid was putting wood in the fire for the night, and then they both stopped what they were doing and looked at Bo when she said, "Did you lose track of your wives?" "Wives?" said Jack, in his "Are you crazy" voice. "What wives?" "Jimmy the pirate had a wife, and he lost track of her," Bo explained. "Oh," said Jack, trying not to smile. "What Jimmy meant," he began, and then he stopped, looking as if he didn't know what to say next. "What Jimmy meant," Arvid said, "is that his wife walked away, or he walked away. You know, like your mama. People who are married don't always stay together." "Well," said Bo, "did you have wives?" "No," said Arvid. "We never had any wives, me and Jack." "Why not?" said Bo. "Well, for my part, no one ever asked to marry me," said Arvid with his biggest smile. "And good thing, too." Bo felt that there was something wrong with that answer, so she looked at Jack, who had gone back to shaving. "I was gonna get married when I was real young back home," Jack said, and he wiped soap off his face with a towel. "Nellie was her name. She died of a fever same time as Mama Nancy." Bo stood still. A lot had happened to her papas before they got her, and it made her feel funny. She pulled her pajama top over her head and bent down to put her slippers on, and then she looked up into Jack's face and said, "Was she nice?" Jack smiled and nodded. "Was she pretty?" Bo asked. "People you love are always pretty," said Jack, and Bo knew that was true.